Hey, yo, what's going on, guys? We got a brand new episode of Buy or Bust. Today we're going to be talking about Surge. We're going to give you 3 decks, as well as the pros, the cons, the floor, and the ceiling for this card. But let's go ahead and jump right into it. In case you guys did not know, Surge is the brand new Series 5 card releasing with the brand new X-Men season on Tuesday. And this card does have the ability on reveal, give the top card of your deck -1 cost and +1 power. And additionally, after you play it, repeat this ability. As you'll see on screen here from the dev video, this is what it looks like in-game itself. This is a very cool ability. It's an ability that can reproc multiple times, so it's not just a one and done for a 2 cost, which is really cool. But let's go ahead and talk about some of the key cards that synergize with Surge, as well as some of the counters to this card as well. So first and foremost, I am thinking of a Silver Surfer style list. You'd like to be able to play Sarah anyways when it comes to Silver Surfer to be able to get more of your 3-drops out either later in the game or potentially even earlier, just depends on what happens, mostly end of the game. But with Silver Surfer here, you're also running Brood, you're running Sebastian Shaw. Those are 2 cards that do get some really great value from getting hit by your Surge itself, reducing the cost of those cards and increasing the power. Of course, Sebastian Shaw getting hit by Surge will add 3 power since his ability adds 2 power to himself. The Broodling starting off at 3 power instead of 2 power allows you to add Broodlings with 3 power to the board. That's without Galacta, of course. So I think it's a really good, just not counter, a synergistic card with this as well. I do also think Thanos, your stones getting hit with -1 cost is kind of like with Fastos. Of course, Fastos is random. It's either -2 cost or +2 power, so it's either or, whereas with Surge, it is specific. The next card you draw, if it doesn't get disrupted, of course, is what is getting the reduced cost and additional power. So it's good with Thanos with these stones and potentially other value, maybe if you're trying to hit the Wiccan or if you're playing some of this Thanos ongoing. You do, of course, have Sarah as well. I was talking about Sarah a little bit earlier. I think not just specifically with Surfer, but I think Sarah in general is going to get value from these Surge cards. Of course, you're going to get more value if you play the Surge cards out early, but you could also hold them for some late game Sarah value itself, or Sarah even getting hit by Surge allows you to get Sarah out a turn early, which is also very nice. Now, of course, the key counters we're thinking about is Mobius. This card does reduce the cost of the top card in your deck. So Mobius, of course, cancels that out because your cards cannot have reduced cost if your opponent does have Mobius on the board. Of course, we do have Korg, which is a disruption card. If you play Surge and then your opponent plays Korg for the same turn, that is going to disrupt your Surge value. Also, even if it's not same turn, it really just depends on priority. So if you Surge first and then they play Korg, Korg will shuffle into a rock into your deck, which does shuffle your cards. So you're not necessarily going to get the card you hit with Surge. Now, if they play Korg first and then you play Surge, your Surge will still hit that card you're going to draw next. It just depends on play order when it comes to Korg itself. And then, of course, Shadow King, any of these cards that do get additional +1 power. Shadow King, of course, resets that power back to its base power. You could also talk about some other disruption cards like a Rock Slide or even like a Baron Mordo. You're not probably seeing a lot of Baron Mordo. Maybe you will this week, but I'm not really leaning onto that. But like Rock Slide and Korg are starting to be more relevant itself. I'm seeing a lot of that when it comes to like Darkhawk. I've been playing some Darkhawk myself, so I wouldn't be surprised if people play more of that this week. But let's talk about the pros and the cons for this card. So, the good for this card is going to be that the ability can re-proc itself. That's a good pro. You can do this multiple times. You can get cards discounted multiple times. Cards getting additional power multiple times. Also, additionally, it is a high combo potential. That's what I'm saying. With it being able to reproc, this can happen multiple times. This isn't just a one-and-done single turn thing. Whereas Fastos, of course, does your entire deck. At least with this, you know your next card is going to get this additional power and this reduced cost going forward. It is a low cost. Surge is a 2-cost card, so you can play this out on curve or even maybe a little bit later in the game to get value. You don't necessarily have to play this out on curve. You might get the most value playing it on curve because then you're able to really start getting this chain reaction going. But you don't necessarily have to. And it's a plugin. I think this is a 2-cost card. You can kind of plug into a large variety of decks. It's not just completely narrow and niche to one certain archetype. So I think that's where that really works there. Now, talking about the bad for this card, you don't always hit the cards you want to hit, So you're not going to be able to play the cards out on curve you necessarily always want to. With it being drawn, of course, this is still an RNG card game. At the end of the day, you're not necessarily going to hit every single thing you want to hit. when it comes to just playing Marvel Snap itself. But like with Surge, you know, you're not always going to hit the card you want to have the reduced cost and the +1 power. The power can be disrupted by deck disruptors, like I was saying too. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more Darkhawk and Korg with all the Thanos and stuff we're seeing right now. I mean, just be surprised if we see just more of that, especially if Airshim even comes back into the mix. I've been seeing a little bit of Airshim still, but like Thanos is still incredibly popular, which means Darkhawk is going to need to start making a resurgence. So I wouldn't be surprised if people start playing that a lot more this next season. And it's a low base power. It only has 2 base power itself. Of course, that's not what you're really, like, you know, playing this card for, is because the 2 base power itself. You're playing for the ability it does, kind of like Ravonna. Ravonna has 2 power, but you don't really play Ravonna out because you have to have 2 power on the board. You play it because her ongoing ability is so good. And then, you know, Shadow King and Mobius might become more popular again. People are playing a lot more tech cards. Thanos, there's so many different lists of Thanos. I say Thanos because Thanos is literally everywhere. Running Mobius, running Shadow King. There's tech versions of that. There's other just tech cards. People running Shang-Chi, Shadow King. Like, they're just everywhere. Tech cards exist. You know, they're in the game. But let's talk about the floor and the ceiling for this card as well. All right, so here's what we got going on. The ceiling, the peak, the best you can do with Surge is play Surge out on curve, or she's a 2/2. And then it is 4 draws, because you play her out on 2. You get your draw on turn 3, you get your draw on turn 4, you get your draw on turn 5, you get your draw on turn 6. Those are 4 draws that get hit each with a -1 cost and a +1 power. Individually, they get hit with a -1 cost and a +1 power. And if you play all those out, you get the Surge chain reaction to go on for the rest of the game. That is the peak. That would be the ceiling for this card itself. I think logistically, what you're going to get is more of the middle ground here. You play it on curve, maybe a turn later, and then 2 or 3 of your draws are what you're actually able to play out. So you get the chain reaction to go off 2 to 3 times. So you have those cards that are getting the additional power, whether it is 2 cards or 3 cards. I don't think it necessarily has to hit 4 cards. If it hits 4 cards and you have the perfect curve in the world, you know what? That is amazing for you. But I don't think it has to. I think this is more the baseline. You're going to get 2 to 3 of these hits to be good. And the cool thing about this card, too, is they don't have to be played out immediately. It's not like you have to play Surge and then immediately play the card that she gave the buff to. You can play it a turn later or a turn after that, like, and then get the Surge to go off again. So it's not a has to be played next turn kind of thing, which is really good for this card. And then I think on the low end, you either draw her late and you don't get to do any of the chain reaction stuff, or you only get like 1 draw at that, you know, and you're able to get the chain reaction. I guess that's technically like 2 draws. The chain reaction for that is what happens. Or you played it out on turn 5 and you only get the -1 cost, +1 power to your turn 6 draw. So like that's like the worst case scenario with Surge, which it might happen, it might not happen. But I think the middle ground, I think, is what I probably will see a little bit more consistently with this card. But let's jump into the 3 decks that I have made for this card itself. So we do have the Electric Surfer over here, which this is going to be a Silver Surfer list. Whoa! With Sebastian Shaw, you have Juggernaut, you have Absman, Galacta, and Enchantress. A lot of Thanos ongoing right now. So Enchantress to help with all of the ongoing cards. You also do have Sarah, you have Zabu in this list to be able to get Zabu, Galacta, or getting Absman, Galacta, and Enchantress to be 3 costs. With Sarah, that makes them 2 costs. That's pretty cool. And Surge Zabu into Surge could give you some potential value as well. Think about Surge into Absman, which if you guys have seen the Marvel Yap we have here on the channel, shout out to Dance. Surge into Absman. So then the next card you play additionally will have a -2 cost, +2 power. So then that starts a chain reaction of that going forward. That is, of course, the God roll, which would be amazing. And some people are going to hit that. But like, that's when you really start to see. That's literally like Fastos, what Fastos could have been. You know, every card gets hit -2 cost, +2 power, but like that's with GOP, so don't do that. But so like there's different lines to this list, and it's Surfer. So like there's tech options. Captain Carter is actually amazing now. If you guys didn't already know, her being a 3 cost makes this even better. You have Copycat to steal an ability from your opponent's, you know, bottom card of their deck, which more often than not they're not going to draw. So it's just really solid what you got with the options here. Next, we do have some small ball. We are using the Season Pass card, Esme, as well, which has the On Reveal ability. Copy a card from your deck to your hand and give it 3 costs, 4 power, which is the same of Esme's. So we're playing some more of the small ball. This kind of reminds me of like an older or a newer rendition of the Agent Venom shell. I think there's going to be a couple different iterations or renditions of this list that you can kind of mess around with. This is what I thought could go pretty well, but I think this is very interesting. Of course, you have your Surge, reducing the cost of an Iron Man and giving him +1 power is pretty nice, especially even if he's been hit with an Agent Venom. Then he's getting, you know, be a 5/4 at that point with the SMA, or not the SMA, with the Surge and the Ancient Venom, or White Tiger, vice versa. Like, there's just a couple different ways I feel like you can play this out to get some good value. Of course, people start dropping some large power, but it's still like a lot of ongoing kind of stuff. So I think you can kind of wiggle around some of that. And then next, we do have a Ajax Affliction list. With Surge, we're using Surge as kind of just like a discount enabler, either for Sarah value or potentially for just be able to get like a Hazmat to be cheaper or a Luke Cage to be cheaper. You have Zabu because you have 3 different forecasts in this deck. So you just a couple different lines here to be able to use Surge to get value, to have extra power on your cards, because even if you don't have Luke Cage and Hazmat hit your cards, they'll have additional power because of Surge itself. So you're kind of, it's a net even reaction whenever Hazmat goes off, because your cards lose 1 power, but they've already gained 1 power from Surge. So that's kind of like where my head went with that. But let's go ahead and talk about Surge herself and my final thoughts on this card. Since we don't have spotlights anymore and we just have snapbacks, we get to jump straight into the Surge just opinion and what I think is going to happen with this card. All right, so this is the Creative House Pocket variant for Surge as well, which was originally going to be the Spotlight. I'm still not necessarily aware or like don't know what they're going to be doing with Spotlights. Maybe they'll be in the shop. I think they said something about them potentially being in the shop still. But this Creative House Pocket variant looks great. I do think this card is pretty strong. Of course, it is a combo-centric card where you do have to play the card that did get hit with the Surge to go off again. But I'm thinking a card that can re-proc and multiple times make your cards cost less and give them additional power is good. So I think that's a really solid card. That's why I have it higher in its strength. And I think it's fairly flexible. It's a 2-cost card. It's not a 3-cost. It's not a 4-cost. You can play this in a large variety of decks. She'll, of course, have homes that are best for her. But I do think this is a very solid card. I don't necessarily know if it will be adjusted. Maybe they reduce her power to like a 2/1 potentially if they were thinking this ability is too OP for what it is. Or they may wait another season because, you know, how that goes. But I do think overall that this is a buy. I would definitely get Surge, especially with the way card acquisition is right now. It is much better. I still think it's still only been a week, but I do think it is much better than with the Spotlights. So you're going to be able to get Surge, and if you open these packs, you don't have any cards from last season, you can also potentially get some of the cards from last season. But I think Surge is going to be a very good card. I think what she does is strong, and I think she's a 2-cost. She's playable in a large variety of decks. I think you'll find her in Surfer if you love Surfer. You can play her in Thanos if you love Thanos. The Affliction is kind of what I was thinking. You could play her in Small Ball. I feel like there's some even like hand buff or even like a just token decks. You have all sorts of Surge value there. But I think this card is going to be good. I do want to note overall as we come to a close over here that if you guys did enjoy the video, definitely feel free to like, comment, and subscribe if you're new. Thank you guys for all of the love and support as we are in a new transitional period of time in my life now, since I have a kid, so we're trying to still be super active and stuff and be on top of posting videos. I really appreciate all the support and all the kind words from you guys. But I do want to say, at the end of the day, get cards that you guys enjoy playing. I can yap and talk about all these cards all you want on Buy or Bust and tell you that I think you should get them. But at the end of the day, you want to get what you want to play. Use your resources the way you want to use them. Oh no, you bought Arishem with 6k tokens. Tucker hates Arishem. Why'd you do that? You wanted to play Arishem. Just do it. Play what you want to play. At the end of the day, like this game, it boils down to what you want to do, what's going to bring you joy. Some cards are going to be OP, so I'm going to suggest some of those cards to buy. Some of those cards I think are just going to be good, so I'm going to suggest to buy those goods. And there are bad cards. I know I haven't really said a lot of bad cards recently, but I'm more optimistic, I'd say, than most. So definitely take that also into consideration when you watch these. But I do think this game is going into the right place, and I'm very excited to see as this continues to unfold with these new card acquisition changes and how these cards become more accessible to people that are limited in resources or that have an abundance in resources. So I think, you know, we're right about cards. We're wrong about cards. You know, cards get buffed in OTAs. We don't have an OTA for a month, so we're not going to have any cards get adjusted for like an entire month, and our patch isn't until like the beginning of June anyways too. So like we're having a lot of time where these cards are kind of just gonna be as is unless there is a pop-up OTA or hotfix or something. So keep that in mind too with these new cards coming out and these old cards from last season or prior season when you want to buy what you want to buy. But once again, thank you guys so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. If you guys stuck around to the end, let me know down below. What's your guys' favorite soda? I know it's a random question, but what's your guys' favorite soda? But until next time, it's Unreal. God bless, and Tucker out.